What's going on YouTube? This is Texans Takeover here, back with another video. In today's video, we have my record predictions for the Houston Texans. A little early, we're going to do another one after training camp and stuff like that. Um, but the schedule was released a couple of days ago. This is the Texans schedule. You got Bills week 1 at home, Bengals week 2 at home as well, and then you go away to Indianapolis, at home to the Cowboys, away to the Titans, go across the pond to London to play the Jaguars in Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Team might go down to the championship if anyone watches soccer. Rooting for that as a Chelsea fan to happen this weekend. Um, they play Everton at home, so if they lose, they go down. Obviously, with the relegation systems and stuff like that. But we play the Jaguars in their stadium, and then the Giants at home after going to London. Then we have our bye week. Then you got the Chargers away, Browns away, Colts at home, Ravens at home, Steelers away, Sunday Night Football there, Commanders away, Jaguars at home, Eagles on Christmas. This Colts game, I believe, is Thursday Night Football as well. But then Eagles away, Packers away, and Titans away. So we're going to get into this record prediction. Maybe a little bit higher than some people think, maybe a little bit lower than some people think. But we're starting off week 1 against the Bills. I'm going with a Texans victory. Ooh, that's a little big. Let's go to the pen. We're going to have to change colors. Golly. I suck with these things. We're going with the Texans W week 1. I just think that the Texans always have their way with the Bills at home. Josh Allen doesn't really throw the ball too well in Energy Stadium. Even last year with Davis Mills at the helm, we were still able to knock him off by 4. Defense was excellent that game. Defense got even better. Bills coming in with a new head coach, an entire new identity, entire new system. I think it's going to be an adjustment period for them. And I think it might take a couple of weeks to get going, and they do have a very tough first couple of weeks. Is it Joe Brady coming into the head coach job? You're not really wanting to play the Texans week 1, considering you're going to have to instill your offense, and this is the first, you know, true game rep that your team is going to get all together, for 4 quarters at a time. And that's against Neil Hunter, that's against Will Anderson, that's against Eric Stingley, that's against Kamari Lassiter, that's against Kalen Bullock, Jalen Petrie, Reed Blankenship now, Aziz, Henry, even Wade Woodaz now, Caden McDonald, Sheldon Rank, like this defense is stacked. I just don't think it's a matchup that the Bills are going to want to have. And Josh Allen's never won an Energy Stadium, so it does give me, some confidence headed into this Week 1 matchup. Obviously, we lost Week 1 last year against the Rams. It was, but I think we do bounce back at home this year against the Bills. Week 1, Week 2 against the Bengals. I am also going with a victory here. Um, the rationale behind this is that the Bengals are always a slow starting team. I think it's going to take a couple weeks for that defense to gel as well, just because they're trying to add so many different pieces to it with Dexter Lawrence, with Jonathan Allen, with who'd they draft? Was it Cassius Howell they drafted? And then Shamar Stewart still needs to grow into himself. Obviously, Cam Taylor-Britt, Dax Hill are decent players. And then you got Brian Cook on the back end who just gave a bag too. But I think it's going to take a decent amount of time for that Bengals defense to gel. And I just think that offensive line is not going to be able to match up with that Texans defensive line. It's something that they really still need to invest in, and they just haven't because of how bad that defense has been. Um, and I just think it's going to, lead to their ultimate loss in week 2 against the Texans. I don't think they're all, their high-powered offense. I don't think it's going to be a match for the Texans defense. And then I think the Texans might be able to have their way against that defensive team or the defense that the Bengals have. Maybe a little bit later in the season, I'd start to change my mind, but I think the Bengals always start out slow. And I think, they need to instill something there defensively before they become a complete unit. And I don't think that's going to happen week 2 per se. I think it'll happen closer to, in this case, when the Texans would have their bye, but it doesn't really matter for the Bengals' sake. But around week 8 is when I think the Bengals are starting to kick into gear and be that team that everyone starts to fear a little bit. Week 3, away to the Colts. I think this is going to be unpopular, but I'm going to give us our first loss here, week 3. Um, trying to be a little unbiased here. Do I think we can win? Absolutely. Do I think we win every single game this year? No. That's why I have a loss to the Colts. I'll put L instead. Some people are going to say, hey, the Texans got off to a hot start. This should be a game that they're winning. It's always tough in Indianapolis. It's always tough playing a division rival. Um, you know, I'm switching it back to a win. I just can't rationalize losing to the Colts when that team just doesn't excite me at all. Like, I'm back and forth. Um, just the Colts team doesn't really excite me. I feel like the Texans had their obviously Daniel Jones is playing hurt, and I don't think he's going to be his true self at the start of next year, just because of that Achilles tear. They paid so much money to him that they weren't really able to do much in free agency. Like Jalen Travis and Tanner Bartolini are their starting center and tackle now. Without Braden Smith, Latu is a decent edge. You've got two linebackers potentially that are rookies starting for you in Boetcher and Allen, and then you got Akeem Davis Geither. I mean, this team doesn't excite me really. You got Halsey and Bynum as your two safeties. Travarius Ward's a good player. Sauce Gardner's a good player. Justin Wally's just not great as a nickel. You lose Kenny Moore. Obviously, you have Jonathan Taylor. You have Alec Pierce. We don't know what Daniel Jones is going to be that early on into the year. I could see them get off to a flyer. I just think our defense is going to be able to have our way with them, especially that interior front with the Colts. I think Quentin Nelson's the only good name there on that offensive line. I think they need to reinvest there. Bernard Ryman's a decent player, don't get me wrong. Malcolm Calvis is a decent player too, but it's just hard because you have such a good defense. It's hard to predict against you. Um, and I mean, if Grover Stewart and Forrest Buckner play, I'm going to change this back to a loss. I'll stick with my gut. Lost to the Colts, so 2-1 to start out the year, but two very respecting wins, and then a loss to a division opponent. You get back to winning ways though against the Cowboys and the Titans. Um, Two self-explanatory ones. I just don't know if the Titans are going to be that great of a team. Robert Saleh seems to be continuing a lot of what he did with the Jets, and I think the Titans are going to win about 6 games next year, which I think is an improvement. I think they did well in free agency and a decent draft too, but I don't think they have the talent on the roster really to match to these playoff caliber teams like the Texans are. Um, I'd give the edge to the Jaguars all day of the week, the Chargers all day of the week, the Ravens, the Steelers, the Eagles, the Packers all day of the week. These teams that have kind of established themselves as playoff caliber teams, I think are going to have the edge against the Titans. Not to say I think they're a bad roster. I think they could be competitive in a decent amount of games, but I just think the Texans will be able to pull that one away, specifically there in week 5. So, and then the Cowboys, that defense still doesn't inspire me. I think Caleb Downs is going to be a good player. Don't get me wrong, but eh, no real edge threat. I know you have Ezra Raku, and then you get Malachi Lawrence. I think it's going to take a while for Malachi Lawrence to develop into a good player in the NFL, maybe 2 years or so, and that's not like an extremely long time. But I don't think it's going to happen week 4 of his rookie year. For the Cowboys fans that might be upset in the comment section, you know that offense is tremendous. Don't get me wrong. CD, Pickens, Javonte, you gave a very nice deal to. You did a lot of good business with him in free agency. Then you have a great offensive line. You have a good tight end room with Jake Ferguson. Dak Prescott's obviously one of the best game managers in the NFL, but the interior defensive line's great. You reinvested at linebacker, which I think is important. I still think you need more there. The secondary got somewhat better. I think you could have used some more chips in there too throughout the draft process. But I mean, you did have a very, very solid draft. Um, one of the best in the NFL in my opinion. So I don't think it's like your team's going to be bad. It's just, you know, Rashawn Gary comes in. Jay Sean Barham, I think, is a good player, but like Kobe Durant, Deron Bland doesn't really inspire me in terms of corners. And then Jalen Thompson, Malik Hooker are decent, but don't inspire me too much either. Caleb Downs, obviously, the star of that secondary. D Winters is all right. I don't think he should be a starting linebacker. As a who's solid, but not a linebacker. Again, Demarion Overshown, I guess, could do a role. But, I mean, it's Winters and Overshown, and I think you need something else in that linebacker core. Um, just as a signal caller to be a really cohesive unit as a defense. I don't, there's some talent there. I just think there needs to be more added to that defense compared to that offense. And I think it's going to be similar to the way that the Broncos were just able to shut the Cowboys down last season. Um, I just think the Texans defense, if they shut down that offense, I don't think they'll really have a response for that team. So I have them winning week 4 and week 5. I am going to switch that Colts game. You know what? I am. I've been debating it. We're starting off 5-0 in my opinion. It's a little much, but I have our first loss coming against the Jaguars. Um, so where am I going to put this? We'll give it a little. Oh, I can't do that. Okay. So we'll just. What if we just highlight this one red? There we go. I think that gets the message off. And if you're watching this video, you'll know what this is. You can put an L. Lose to the Jaguars in London. I just think the travel is going to be a little much. Jaguars do it pretty consistently. The Texans haven't done it since 2019, was it? Or did they do it recently and I'm just forgetting? 2022 maybe or something like that. I don't know. But we did play the Jaguars in London once, I believe. I don't recall if we won or not. It's not that I think the Jaguars are a better team than the Texans. I think we beat them at home. Um, but I just think going away to London, a team that kind of has it in control, like knowing what they do, what their routine is, headed to London once a year around the same time every single year. I think they'll have it down to a T. Um, so I just think the Jaguars slightly edge it. I think it'll be a competitive game. It's going to be a fun game for people in the UK to go watch. I don't think we win just because of, again, Jaguars and Texans are two similar teams in the fact that they're going to be competing for the AFC South. It's going to be a very competitive game. Obviously, I expect the Texans to try to give it their all. I just think, the Jaguars are a very good team. Like, to be honest, I don't like saying that, but they are a genuinely solid team. I think they'll have, playoff caliber roster. The draft wasn't great. Their free agency moves weren't great. So maybe the Texans get the slight edge in terms of talent, but I think that gets rescinded when you have to, fly, 12 hours across an entire ocean, 6 hour time change. So the Jaguars kind of have it down in their system already. The Texans don't. And you're playing them this early on in the season. You hope you can blow out the Titans so you can rest some guys, get them ready for next week. But I have us losing week 6 to the Jaguars there. So drop to 5-1 in week 6. Week 7, I do have a win against the Giants. I think they'll be a competitive team again. Hardball teams are always hard to face, to be honest. But I just think that, the Texans defense and, the Giants' lack of interior defensive line is going to really play into what the Texans try to do, and that's just bully you off the line of scrimmage. I think Keelan Rutledge, Wyatt Teller, if he's still starting at that point, Ed Ingram are all going to have big days against a team like the Giants that don't really have that interior force anymore with Dexter Lawrence. So I just think that interior offensive line is going to be no match for that Giants interior defensive line, and that feels weird saying as a Texans fan, that saying, hey, our offensive line actually has the advantage in this one. But against the Giants, we genuinely do. Um, and I think that's going to be the key thing that leads to this victory in week 7 against the Giants. So head into the bye week 6-1, which is a very solid record. We'll go down to 3 here, and we'll put 6-1. Against the Chargers week 9, I do have us losing again. Away at LA, maybe a little, sloppy coming off the bye against a very good team in Jim Harbaugh, who's going to try to do a lot of the same things that the Texans do, and that's just play smash mouth football, try to take the life out of you. Did beat them away last season when we were trying to compete for seeding in the playoffs. So, maybe there's that, but you can't win every single game. You're still going to have fatigue coming from London, even though you had a bye week to kind of just relax a little bit. There's still going to be fatigue there. You have that time change coming to week 7 against the Giants. You're just able to get it done. I think that'll be a close game. And I don't think that's a game that really determines whether or not this team's good or not. If we lose to the Giants, I completely understand it, to be honest, because of how tough it is to come back and play a game the same day, because you have to take a travel day or two just to get back into the same time zone, but whatever. I think it'll be a little lethargic week 9 against the Chargers, and I think they'll just be able to edge it. You're 6-1 though. You do have games to afford to lose, and I think you lose here week 9 to the Chargers. Week 10 against the Browns, I do have a victory here. I don't see any inspiration from that Browns offense to be able to put up points against this Texans defense. Their defense is a very solid unit. Don't get me wrong. I think they'll, have a very decent defense. And I think it could be a competitive game just because of how good both defenses are. But just the lack of certainty at quarterback. The investments on the offensive line, I think, are decent. It's just where are they going to play? I think it's going to take, an entire season to figure out what the best five is in terms of where they lay out across the offensive line. I think, Fano, Titus, maybe Zion Johnson, Elton Jenkins, and then whoever else. I can't remember who else was brought in. There was there was another one that they paid money to. Um, but like I think it's gonna take a while because Titus, are you wanting to play him at right tackle? Are you wanting to play at guard? Fano, is he gonna be your left tackle? Does he have the measurements in the NFL to play tackle? Is Titus gonna have to shift over to left tackle? I thought that's why Maui Noah made a little bit more sense, just because I thought he could play left tackle potentially in the NFL because of his athleticism and his arm length. But they go Fano. I think he's a good player. Don't get me wrong. I don't know if he can play left tackle, and I think that's something the Browns really need to look at. And I thought that's why Mondre Freeling could be in contention at that spot. He wasn't. So I just don't see that offense really exploding next season, to be honest. Maybe Shador's the guy, maybe he's not. He's fighting for a job throughout the entire season, which I think could inspire some better play. But I don't know. I don't see it with the Browns yet. I like the pieces they got. I like Concepcion. I'm not too big of a fan of Boston, but I like Samson. I like Judkins. Obviously, adding on the offensive line is never a bad thing, but I just think the Texans' talent would edge it in this one. Um, and then against the Colts, I do have another victory at home. I think at this point of the season, Texans will find their identity. Obviously, the Colts already know their identity, which is run it with Jonathan Taylor, play action, and deep shots to Alec Pierce. I'm probably going to run a similar thing headed into this next season. Had a very good draft, the Colts. Didn't have too many picks early on. Just CJ Allen in the second, which I thought was a decent pick. But Thursday Night Football, Texans coming off a win, playing at home. I don't know who the Colts have prior to that. Um, but I just think Texans do show up on Thursday Night Football for some reason. They did against the Bills last year. I think it'll happen again against the Colts. And for some reason, the Texans defense is always the Colts kryptonite. Um, we beat them even with an entire backup roster last season with Riley Leonard playing. And I just think, Texans are going to have their way with the Colts. I don't know how many games the Colts win. I think they'll be a competitive squad, which is why I originally had us losing to them week 3. But, um, I think the Texans just edge it out and sweep the season series. Week 12 against the Ravens, I have a loss here. I think, this could definitely be a win. Maybe the Texans got away with the Ravens curse last year, but um, Jesse Minter's going to add something to that defense that I think is really going to instill something in them. We beat them in Baltimore last year with no Lamar, no Kyle Hamilton, no Roquan, no nothing, no Matty BK. Um, just a depleted Ravens roster when we played them, and they almost made the playoffs last season. After starting 1-5, they finished 8-9, so they went 7-4 or something. I think the Ravens will be a good team headed into next year. I think Jesse Minter's going to do some really good things with them. I think that defense is going to improve. Lamar's a question mark, to be honest, in my opinion. I just I don't know. I don't know if he's going to be a winner in the NFL. Um, but I mean, he always has his way with the Texans. The Ravens are always the Texans' kryptonite, whether at home or away. We saw it on Christmas a couple years ago. That sucked, but um, I do have us losing this one, and I think it could be a very competitive game. And I do think it'll come down to the wire. But I think the Ravens just slightly edge it. I could see the Texans winning this one, but um, drop our third game of the year, so we are now 8-3, so a very very respectable record. And I have us winning the next 3 actually. Against the Steelers, it's a win on Sunday Night Football. Against the Commanders, it's a win. We're going to have to erase that one. We'll make the W green. Why not? Be creative. And then the Jags at home, I already said I think it's a win. I don't think there's ever a season where the Jags sweep us. I think there's seasons where we sweep them. But if they take a game, I think we take the other game. I think the last time they swept us was probably 2017 when they went to the AFC Championship. They beat us in London. We beat them at home. I just think, again, could be another very competitive game. I think the Texans are going to, be a very solid unit headed into this next year. And, beat some good teams. I think the Steelers are a good team. I don't think after we saw that playoff game and them kind of running it back with a very similar roster that they're going to really inspire. headed into next year. I think the defense is going to be solid as it always is. I don't know what Mike McCarthy is going to be able to do with that offense, but just not that many pieces along the offense to really do stuff with. You get DK, you have Michael Pittman, I guess. Um, you lose Gainwell, who I thought was very important to what they did, especially with how quick Rodgers likes to get the ball out. It's either a deep shot or get the ball out quick, so I think Michael Pittman does fit, but um, I think you want some more there if you're Pittsburgh in terms of offensive like explosiveness, I guess is the way to put it. Commanders week 14, I think Jaden Daniels is a good player. I just don't think that defense is good. I think Sonny Styles would be good. Um, you pay a ton of money to Odafe Owe. Um, the interior of the defensive line kind of depleted from years prior. Um, you still need another edge presence as well. I struggle to see it with the Commanders. I think they need to kind of look at that defense and kind of revive it. And I mean, Jaden Daniels got to stay healthy, to be honest, too. Like last year, he was banged up way too much for a quarterback. He's got to stay out of that injury trouble. I think they'll be a decent squad if he's able to stay healthy. But again, if he's not, there's going to have to be a conversation in Washington if he's not able to stay healthy. Not this year, if he gets hurt for a game or two this year, it's fine. But the year after, if he continues to get hurt, there's going to have to be a conversation there. I think Mariota's fine, but you need your starting quarterback there to be a competitive unit. And I just don't know how often Jaden Daniels is going to do that for you. If you have the discourse with J.J. McCarthy, you can have the discourse with Jaden Daniels just because he was so in and out last season that it was kind of just like, well, was he healthy or is he just sitting for the rest of the year to sit for the rest of the year? Week 16 to the Eagles, I do have us losing that one. It's on Christmas Eve. You know, you come away with 3 wins in a row, and you eventually lose Week 16 to the Eagles on Christmas Eve. So, Texans kryptonite is Christmas. I think the Eagles will be a little bit more fun this year. I don't know what the hell's going on with A.J. Brown. I don't know what's going to go on with their offense this year, but I think they will be a very solid unit. Obviously, that defense is great. It's going to be a defensive battle. And I think if we can stop their own Saquon Barkley and really prevent, um, Jalen Hurts from running the ball as well. He's not the best thrower when he doesn't have all that pocket time. That offensive line is just so good for the Eagles. So I think it's going to be a war, to be honest. Um, I see the Eagles just narrowly edging it out, probably like 24-21 or 21-17, something like that. Low scoring ball game, but I think they take it um, at home on Christmas Eve. Week 17 to the Packers. I do have us actually winning that game. Um, you know, I it's tough. Yeah, I'm going to win. We're closing out the season with 2 victories. Didn't lose back-to-back games this season, which is nice in my opinion. I think the Packers are going to be an interesting unit. Is Marco Parsons going to be as explosive as he can be? Is Jordan Love going to be as consistent, or like, is he going to be consistent next season? I was not going to be consistent as can be because he hasn't really been consistent throughout his career. But can he be consistent heading into next season? Questions to be asked about the Packers. What are they going to do with the short and receiving room after getting rid of a couple Dobbs going to New England and not really investing? Is Matthew Golden going to be able to take that step? Is Tucker Kraft going to be able to come back from injury and be his best self? Just things to ask about the Packers. And I think, when it gets to the end of the year, teams are going to be worn down. And I think the Packers will probably be clinching a playoff spot already at this point. And I think the Texans are going to be playing for some high seeding. Um, so, yeah, I have us going away to Green Bay and pulling away a win somehow. And then week 18 to the Titans at home. I think if we have to win this game, we'll win this game. If not, then I don't think we will. Um, you know, I think it's going to be a case of if we have to play for a seed, I'd rather us get the 2 seed than 3 seed. So I'd rather us, if we go into that day as the 2 seed, but we need to win to secure the 2 seed, then I think we play our starters. And then if we go up by a lot or we see the scores in other games, then we pull. But I think if it comes down to it and we need to win that game, I think that's a game we win. So if we go back here, let's go. Oh, it's a little short. Let's go. What was it? 3? Yeah, it was 3. So I have us finishing 13-4. Let me know what y'all think down below. Do y'all think the Texans can win 13 games next year? I certainly can. Um, Maybe we even beat the Jags in London and we win 14 games, or the Chargers game gets flipped, or the Ravens game gets flipped, or the Eagles game gets flipped. But then maybe, the Colts game gets flipped, or the Bills week one just come out firing. Bengals find themselves out already. Um, Cowboys offense just goes off. That could be another scenario. Um, Jaguars are just incredible next year and they sweep us. Packers game's obviously a toss up. Jen Daniels able to stay healthy. The Commanders invest in the deadline. There's a lot of stuff that can go on. This is before injuries. This is before everything. This is just a fun prediction to do before training camp and all that stuff starts. So let me know what y'all think right now. How many games y'all think the Texans are going to win heading into next year? If you did enjoy this video, please be sure to like, subscribe, and as always, it's Texans Takeover. Excuse me, and I'm out. Peace.